today. Don't really have time for an intro. Just sorry about the reflection being so bad. I film over clips, which I know looks bad, but it's just easier for me. Maybe I'll learn to do it the good way, but I'm just so dense when it comes to technology stuff. Like, oh my god, like, you probably think I'm exaggerating, but I'm really dumb. Okay, enjoy the video. So, apparently I only make videos about antagonistic characters. That doesn't say anything about me. No, really, it doesn't. I remember in high school reading this article about how The Legend of Korra was better than Avatar, which, LOL. But one of the reasons they gave was that Azula was just evil for the sake of being evil, and it legit made me have a grudge on T-Loke for no necessary reason. Azula is one of the most complicated characters I'll probably ever analyze, and figuring out her motivations can be difficult. For example, as a kid, I always wondered why she invited Zuko to join her at the end of Season 2. 'Cause let's face it, I don't think she really needed his help. And on top of that, why did she let Zuko take credit for her striking down Aang? And you might say, because she was trying to set him up. And you might be right about that. In fact, Azula even tries to convince Zuko of this.
Please, Zuko. What ulterior motive could I have? What could I possibly gain by letting you get all the glory for defeating the Avatar? Unless, somehow, the Avatar was actually alive. All that glory would suddenly turn to shame and foolishness. But you said yourself, that was impossible.
And I do think that this is her intention to an extent, but I also think that it's more complicated than that. And before we can fully answer this question, we must first analyze Azula's fundamental beliefs. So, my hypothesis as a cartoon scientist with my little cartoon beaker is that Azula doesn't think that she's lovable. This theory mostly comes from this one line in the episode The Beach.
My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt.
The Beach is probably one of my favorite episodes, but it does get kind of melodramatic towards the end. Like, really, you're all going to have a dramatic monologue about your existential and internal woes right after each other? Even Ty. The transition from monologue to monologue is awkward and unorganic. And it's basically just sloppy emotional info dumping. I know I'm being a little hard on this episode, but whenever I get to this scene, I can't help but roll my eyes a little bit. However, Azula's self-reflection is a little bit different than the other characters. She's vulnerable for a moment, catches herself, and then tries to play off her feelings as indifferent and cavalier. This is the first time Azula is written sympathetically, and it's like we're seeing this brief flicker of humanity in an otherwise apathetic character. If Azula had continued talking about her feelings, then it wouldn't have been as clear to the audience how much she hates being vulnerable, and how rare this type of behavior actually is for her. Which is why her lack of dialogue is actually more developing than the other characters' expositional monologues where they literally say what they feel and why they're feeling it. Making this scene my favorite example of less is more character writing. Azula thinks of herself as a monster, which, I don't know, maybe she is. But I find this interesting because Ozai probably thinks that committing mass genocide is a genuinely good thing to do, and he's an all-around great guy. But Azula knows what she's doing is wrong, and on some level maybe even feels some remorse about it. Because Azula knows she's a bad person, she doesn't think she's worthy of love, and consequently bullies and manipulates people into companionship. She thinks this is the closest she'll ever get to real love and affection. And she thinks she's okay with this. But she's not. Which is why Azula visibly loses her composure for the first time in the show when Mai tells her that she loves Zuko more than she fears Azula.
I guess you just don't know people as well as you think you do. You miscalculated. I love Zuko more than I fear you.
No, you miscalculated. You should have feared me more.
Azula's core philosophy has just been invalidated, and she now knows no matter how clever or calculating she is, in the end, when it comes down to it, she'll always be irrefutably and utterly alone. And this eats away at her until she loses her grip on reality. A lot of people believe that Azula becoming Fire Lord caused her to become unhinged. But really, it's the scene in the Boiling Rock where we first start to see her crack. I also think it's notable that in Azula's first episode, she becomes irritated when her routine is one hair out of place. And in the finale, she's seen anxiously and unevenly chopping chunks of her hair off. This illustrates that she's ironically always been her own worst enemy when it comes to her pursuit for total control. With all of this in mind, why did Azula invite Zuko to join her? Well, personally, I think it's because she actually likes Zuko and wants him in her life, but only in a way where she can have total control over the relationship. And she uses the events of the Season 2 finale to get exactly what she wants. Azula is intuitive, but there's no way she could have known that Aang survived. I think in her mind she thought, if the Avatar turns out to be alive, then Zuko gets blamed. And if not, I get my brother back, so it's a win-win. Some evidence that supports this theory is that Azula warned Zuko to be careful about visiting their uncle without any ulterior motive that I can think of, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but it kinda is for her.
What is it that you want, Azula?
Actually, nothing. Believe it or not, I'm looking out for you. If people find out you've been to see Uncle, they'll think you're plotting with him. Just be careful, dum-dum.
Not only that, but she kind of technically saved his life when they were kids. Don't believe me? Well, let's mosey on over to Zuko alone. Okay, we have a show made in the West, inspired by anime and Eastern cultures, with a Western aesthetic. See you, space cowboy. Okay, I know technically he's not in space, but aren't we all in space, really? It has the vibe, okay? Zuko Alone is my favorite episode, and as a kid, I always found it to be so eerie. Because Zuko's family almost seems like a normal family. You have the loving mother and bickering siblings, but there was something about it that always just felt so fundamentally off. Zuko and Azula are actually part of a pretty standard textbook dysfunctional family dynamic. In this dynamic, you have an abuser, a scapegoat who the abuser projects all of their bad behavior onto, and a perfect savior character that the abuser uses to validate all of that bad behavior. I only know about this dynamic because my mom sat me down to talk about it when I was in high school for reasons. And I was immediately like, oh, it's just like Zuko and Azula. Neither role is ideal. If you're the scapegoat character, then after being told passive-aggressively/aggressively every day of your life that you're a screw-up, you start to believe it. Trust me, I know. And if you're the savior character, you have to fit into the narrow concept of perfection and never waver, despite all the weight that carries. But Azula kinda got both ends of that shit stick. Yes, to Ozai, Azula was born lucky, and Zuko was lucky to be born. But to Ursa, Zuko's the good child, and Azula's the bad one. It seems pretty clear to me that Ursa is projecting her feelings about Ozai onto Azula, but come on, she's 8. And I'm not blaming Azula's behavior on Ursa, but when you say things like this,
What is wrong with that child?
in earshot of them, like their feelings don't even matter, of course they're going to internalize it and think, well, I guess this is just who I am. I'm just bad. Remember what Azula said in the episode The Beach. My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course. I'm not projecting, okay? You're projecting. Despite all of this, Azula does warn Zuko that Ozai is planning on killing him. I mean, she does it in the worst possible way. But remember, as seen in the episode The Beach, Azula hates being vulnerable. Revealing that she doesn't want her brother to die is equal to showing weakness to her. So she warns him as a joke.
Dad's going to kill you. Really, he is.
But saving someone ironically is the equivalent of watching a cringy show ironically. Girl, you just like the show. And if Azula hadn't interfered, there's a good chance Zuko would have died. So theoretically, Aang never would have learned firebending or been able to defeat the Fire Lord. So basically, the end of the 100-Year War is all thanks to this little gremlin. Though then again, if Zuko hadn't have died, then Ursa wouldn't have helped Ozai get on the throne by committing treason, and Iroh would have become Fire Lord. And presumably, depending on how long Azulon lived, ended the war earlier. So, should Zuko have died? I don't know. I'm Olivia, and this has been Cartoon Science.